Hi, welcome to Board Gems, my regular video series, with new videos on the 3rd, 13th, and 23rd of every month, in which I cover an older board game gem. This video is about a game that came out, I think, around 2005. It's not crazy long ago, but oh my god, 17 years now. Whew. I've been in this hobby a while. It's designed by one of my favorite game designers, Reiner Knizia, and is published by what definitely is my favorite game publisher, Glück. And that is Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel is for 3 to 5 players. It's sort of a Goldilocks game. 4 players is kind of where it feels the most natural, but it works great with 3 players. I play it 3-player all the time. 5-player is probably the worst player count. You probably want 3 or 4 is better. It's an area majority game, and most area majority games, often they get better the more players you have, but this one works great even on a low player count. Doesn't play 2-player though. The box says 45 minutes and ages 10 and up. I think both of those are fairly accurate. This is a unique game and actually is fairly different from a lot of area majority games. For one thing, each of the areas will score at different times. And the first area that scores, this is controlled by the players based on what they choose to work on. The early ones are not worth as many points as the later ones. But if the game ends before one of the areas is complete, then it kind of resets and goes back to low scoring. So you want the areas you're strong in to finish and score late in the game, but not too late. And there's an interesting thing where the players work together to build the wonders of the ancient world. And every time a part of it is built or is suggested to be built, the other players can offer their assistance. And the player whose turn it is can choose who to accept, whose offer to accept. But anybody they reject will get victory points. And it's a little bit hard to wrap your brain around the first time or even first few times you play. There's only like 3 different ways of scoring points in the game, but whatever you do will score points in a different way. If you offer something and it's rejected, you will get points. If you offer something and it's accepted, you get to put your temples in the area, and then that will contribute to the majority scoring when that area scores. And you're also collecting chips, and if you collect chips of the same color, then you'll get a kind of a upwardly scaling number of points based on that. So it's a really interesting game, and it's one of the last board games, that and the Tigris and Euphrates card game, which is not really worth talking about. This and that game are the last games designed by Reiner Knizia and published by Glück. A lot of his early designs, many of his early designs, such as Aufheller und Finish, otherwise known as Kingdoms, Quo Vadis, and just quite a few of them have appeared from Glück. This is his last big box game published by Glück. Let me show you how it plays, then I'll talk about why it's still a gem today. To set up the game, place the board on the table between the players. Take all the chips that you'll see here. There's 4 colors, and they're numbered 3 to 6. There's some duplicates. You're going to mix these up, and then you're going to put 1 on each of these round spaces on the outside of the board. There's also these 2-tone ones. You can play with them or without them. It doesn't matter. I won't bother teaching with them. It doesn't change the game a whole lot. Anyway, mix them up, probably face down, but I don't really care. Take this little plain colored, natural wood colored temple piece and place it on the first row of this table here. Give each player all the temples of a single color. Little ones are worth 1, big ones are worth 3 or 5. I think the rules say 3, but you can make them worth whatever you want. And also give them one of these columns, these pillars. You'll see how they come into play in a little bit. There's a deck of cards that have colors matching these pieces here. You're going to shuffle up this deck and give each player 4 cards and place the deck somewhere where everybody can reach. I like to put it in the middle of the board. You could also put it here because this is a turn order track which is completely useless. These are supposed to go on here. Don't bother with it. You can put the cards there if you want, just like that. So besides giving each player 4 cards, also give them what in the English rules is called a trading card. They're always going to have this card in their hand, and these cards are going to, change. You're going to spend them, but you never spend this card. So this is a card. You're going to start with 5 cards in your hand, always the trading card, and 4 others. And finally, we have these special power cards. What do you do with these? Absolutely nothing. You're going to put them back in the box. Heck, put them under the insert. Don't play with these. I suppose if you've played this a million times and you're bored, you can try to add these to spice them up as like a little free expansion, but I find it's much better without them. Over the course of the game, players are going to be building the wonders. Each of these 8 wonders has 3 chips, and on a turn, one of these chips may be claimed, representing that that part of the wonder has been built. When all 3 chips are gone, that wonder is built. At a wonder, players can have temples, like so. When a wonder is finished, it scores, and the player with the most temples in that space for that wonder will get the higher number of wherever this marker is. Second place will get the lower number, and anybody who has at least 1 in there, but not first or second, is going to always get 3 points. Then this marker moves down to here. So the next wonder that's completed will be worth more points, all the way down to here, although it may not get that far, because the game will end when all of a single color of chip is off the board, claimed by the players. Then the game ends. Any wonder that is still incompleted still scores, but at this row that's white, so it's not quite as good as the last ones built, which were down here. Anything incomplete is going to score this lesser amount, but you're also going to score points for the chips that you were able to collect. The more of a single color you have, the more points you get, so you're trying to collect sets of the same color, and these are the points you're going to score based on that. I'll go over these again at the end of the tutorial. Each player is going to start with 1 tiny temple here on the 0 space to track their score, and you're ready to begin. Play is clockwise. On a player's turn, they can do one of 2 things. 1, they can just pass, and this is actually a very easy rule to forget. You can pass, and if you pass, all you do is you draw a card. The other option you can do on your turn is to propose one of these chips to be built. The flow of the game is a player takes their turn, and then everybody draws a card. All players. And then it's the next player's turn, in clockwise order. And after that player's turn, everybody draws a card. So there's cards constantly coming into the game. So on your turn, if you pass, you draw a card. And then, in between turns, everybody draws a card, including you. So you will have drawn 2 cards in that case. There's no hand limit. The other option you can do on your turn is to propose one of these chips, one of these stages of the wonder, to be built. You take your pillar, you place it on one of the 8 spaces, like so. Then you take one of the chips, place it on top. This is what you are proposing to be built. You're in charge, you're the supervisor in charge of building on your turn, and you're deciding you're going to try to build this part. This part of this wonder, the Hanging Gardens here, requires 3 white cards. At this point, any player who has white cards in their hand can now place them face down in front of them as an offer to help. A player can't offer more cards than the number there because this only needs 3 white cards, so you can't offer 4. Now at this point, the current player, blue, has a choice to make. They look at the offers and they can choose whether to accept 1 or more than 1 or none. Do they want and or need help in order to build this? Perhaps blue has 3 white cards on their own. They could reject every other offer. However, every offer that is rejected will give that player who made the offer 1 point for every card they offered. So if black offered 3 white cards and blue rejects that offer, black is going to score 3 points. Not bad. But if an offer is accepted, what happens? The current player can't accept more cards than they need to build. So if in this case black offered 2 and yellow offered 2, blue could at most accept one of those offers. Couldn't accept both because that would be 4 white cards. Don't need 4 white cards. But blue could accept, for example, black's offer of 2 white cards. In that case, yellow would get 2 points, 1 for every card they offered, but blue would have to make up the difference. If they don't have enough from the offers, then blue has to make up the difference with cards in their hand. And if they don't have enough cards in their hand, or if they choose not to contribute, so this number is not reached, 3 white cards are not used for this build, therefore the wonder is not built. This will be put back, and blue just gets nothing. Blue's turn is over. But if this stage of the wonder is completed, so there are enough white cards such that this can be built, in this case 3 white cards, then every player who contributed to the build gets to place 1 temple for every card they offered. In my example, black offered 2 white cards, which blue accepted. Blue adds 1 of their own. So in this case, white would add 1 temple, and black would add 2. These cards go away, and this chip goes to the player whose turn it is. The player who supervised this build, they get this chip. At the end of the game, getting multiples of the same color will be worth points. And then blue's turn would be over. These temples stay there, and then at some point another player may choose a different chip, or one of these chips again, at which point more temples will come in. And when all chips are gone, claimed, then you'll count the temples, and you'll score points on this chart based on what number of wonder was built. If this is the first wonder built of the game, it'll be worth these many points. First, second, third, or lower, but at least 1 temple in there. If it's a tie, then all the tied players get the lower number. So if there's a tie for first, all the tied for first players will get 4 points. If there's a tie for second, all tied players will get the 3 points. Now there is a little wrinkle. Let's reverse this here. As I said, the player whose turn it is gets the chip if that stage of the wonder is built. But not necessarily. A player, as part of their offer, can contribute a trading card. So let's say black offers a trading card. Now again, blue doesn't have to accept it, and if they don't accept it, then black would get 2 points. But if they accept this offer, this card says what the player gains is exchanged. Normally, without this card, if black's offer was accepted, they would be able to put 1 temple in there for every card they offered. But blue would get the chip. Adding this card means black says, you could put temples in there for my cards, but I want the chip. So if blue were to accept and add a white card of their own, so there's 3, in this case, blue would add 3 temples. Black would add none, but black would get the chip. Because there's only 1 chip, only one offer with a trading card can be accepted. If both yellow and black offered a trading card, blue could at most accept one of them, because there's only one chip to give away. And that's a big part of the game, is deciding whether you want to be putting temples in an area, or if you want the chip. Of course, you could also be gunning for these points just by having your offer rejected. So if black, for example, knows that blue really wants the white chip, and black had a lot of white cards, but they don't really care about putting these temples in there, they can add the trading card. Blue won't want to accept the offer, because blue wants the white chip, at which point black would get 3 points. Maybe black would prefer that as opposed to getting temples in here. It's situational. You may want to have temples in here. You may want the chip. Every time a chip is put up for, I want to say put up for auction, it's not really an auction, but put up as a proposal to be built, you have to kind of make that calculation. Do I want to contribute? If I want to contribute, do I want to put temples in there, or do I want the chip? Maybe you want to make a good offer, but not one that's so good that it'll be accepted. Because if your offer is rejected, you still get the points, and you get to keep the card. So you can use that later, but if your offer is accepted, then the cards will be discarded, but you'll get temples in here. So getting points during the game by making offers that are rejected is actually really good, because it's free points. So anyway, anytime a wonder is complete, let's complete this wonder here. So something like this, say. Let's say this is the first wonder completed. So we look at this. Blue would score 8 points. Black would score 4. Let's say they already had 3. And yellow, just having presence in there, but not first or second, would still score 3 points. You don't have a huge number of these pieces, so after a wonder is complete, I recommend taking these pieces off, so you have more to work with for later in the game. And then this marker goes down here. So the next wonder, the second wonder to be completed, will score more points, and potentially all the way down to the 7th wonder. But the game will end immediately when all of a single color is gone. So once all the white chips are gone, the game ends immediately, at which point any wonders that are still not finished will still score for the temples in their areas, but at this rate. And then each player totals up points based on the chips they were able to collect. For each of the colors you've collected, you look and see how many of that chip that you have collected, and you'll score the appropriate points. The player with the most points wins. That's it. You're ready to play Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel is a bit of an odd duck of a game, and it can be hard to wrap your brain around not the rules. The rules are simple, but how to win. Because you can get points in any number of different ways. You can get points by having your temples in the wonders, which will score you points when the wonder is complete, but how many will depend on when the wonder was complete. But you can also get points by making offers and then having them rejected, so you get points throughout the game that way. And of course you want to get the chips, because the chips will give you points. There's only 3 different ways to score, but it feels like whatever you do, you will score points, right? If you make an offer and it's rejected, you score points. If your offer is accepted, you put temples in there and they'll score points later, right? So whatever you do, basically, you're going to score points. But there's only basically 3 ways to score. The main ways are getting your temples in wonders and having the wonders completed late in the game, but not too late. So there's a nice bit of tension there, right? But of course also collecting chips, a lot of a single color, and that actually adds a bit of interesting kind of dynamic with the other players, because you can see what chips the other players have collected. So if you see that the player to your left has a lot of brown, they have 3 brown, guess what? They're going to want a 4th brown. That's worth 10 points. If they propose a brown stage of a wonder to be complete, then you can make a big offer, if you have the cards, of course, and throw in your trading card. He would like to get maybe he needs help to complete it, but he really wants the chip. That's the main thing. And by throwing in your trading card into the deal, he's not going to get the chip. He really wants the chip. Maybe from the other players he can get enough cards that he can complete it. So he rejects yours and you get points for the offer. So you can do things like that. The game is very, very interactive because you see players' motivations, right? It's really just laid out on the table in front of you. Yes, you don't know what cards players have in their hands. That's a relatively minor thing. But you see the chips that players have. You see what chips they want because they're going to want to score extra points for them at the end. And of course, you also know which wonders the players will want to complete because they have temples in there and they're going to score a lot of points. So you always see the other players' motivations. That is public information. So, okay, at the beginning of the game, maybe it's a little bit aimless. You're just trying to complete something. But, some of the chips, the 3 chips, are very easy to complete. You can often just complete them on your own. But then as, wonders start to be constructed and players have started to collect chips, then the motivations come to the fore. You see what players want to do, need to do, and can base your strategy a little bit around that. This game is unique. And it can take a few plays to try to wrap your brain around how it works. And for a lot of people, that might not be worth the effort. Even after a couple plays, it's still hard to see, what's a good play? It's hard to see that, right? A big offer will get rejected. I'll get lots of points for that, but I want my temples in the wonders. So, what's the right move? It can be hard to think that through. And I haven't seen a big problem with analysis paralysis in this game, people just thinking super hard on their turn, because there aren't a lot of factors. There isn't a huge amount of stuff going on in the game, and so much of it is just open, everybody can see what's going on. But it's not trivial to try to figure out what the best offer is. You may want to make as big an offer as possible, because if it's rejected, you'll score lots of points. But if you're accepted, not only will you not get those points, but you might have a ton of temples in a wonder, and you don't need that. If a wonder is complete and you have first place, and you have 1 more temple than the player in second place, or you have 6 more temples than the player in second place, it doesn't matter, you're scoring the same number of points. You want to do well in the majority scoring for the 8 different areas, but you don't want to go excessive in any one particular area. That's a waste of your temples, a waste of your effort. You could have offered a lower bid. If it's rejected, you're not going to get as many points, but you're also keeping more cards in hand for later. You're not giving up as many if your offer is accepted. So there's considerations there, and like I said, it can be hard to wrap your brain around it a little bit. Definitely takes multiple plays. It can be thinky if you want it to be, but it never paralyzes you. It's hard to see what a good move is, but the game is simple enough, it doesn't obfuscate that. You just have to learn it. I mean, the randomness obviously comes into play. I'm not a person that complains about randomness. If you get a lot of cards of a single color, then that kind of dictates your strategy, because you don't have a lot of choice, right? You're not able to offer cards for stages of a different color that are being proposed. You might be tempted to okay, I have 6 white, right? Somebody else is offering a white. I'm just going to put down as many white as I can. Probably they reject it, and I'll score lots of points for it. But a couple things. First of all, they might accept it. Then you got a bunch of temples in there. Maybe you didn't want that as much. But also, if they reject it, sure, you get the points, but players saw your cards. They know you have a lot of, say, white cards in your hand. Are they going to want to propose a white again anytime soon, knowing that you're just going to come in and plop down a whole bunch of whites again and score a bunch more points if it's rejected? No, they'll work on other things. The end of the game is really, really tense. So for a couple of reasons. The obvious reason being, you want the wonders that you're doing well in, that you have a lead in, to finish as late in the game as possible, but still finish. The point difference is quite large for that. So you want to try for that. So let's say for a late scoring wonder, somebody proposes building the last stage of the wonder, the last chip. You have to think about what the numbers are going to look like of the numbers of temples that are in that wonder. For those wonders that are built like really close to the end, like late in the game, you kind of have to math things out a bit. I mean, it's a Knizia. Oh, it's too mathy. Yeah. Go ahead. Say it in the comments. Knizia games are too mathy. The mathiness really only comes in near the very end for those late wonders, the wonders that are built late in the game. So somebody proposes the last stage of a wonder, the last chip. Once that chip is built, assuming it's built on this turn, that wonder will score. And you know exactly how many temples are going to be there in the end, but the question is, whose temples? There's already some there, based on who contributes cards to the wonder and how many. Those numbers that get added to, right? They could change. And you might have a first place, but if you don't play your cards right, you might not end up with first place. So a player proposes the last stage of a wonder to be built, the last chip of a wonder. So after this turn, assuming it's built, it's going to score. Every player is calculating the best offer for them to make, and that player whose turn it is that's proposing to build that wonder has to do that same math. Once the offers come back, they're like, oh, if I accept that offer, like if I reject it, that's going to give them a lot of points, but if I accept it, then they're going to get first place instead of me, right? So maybe I shouldn't accept that. You know, you have to take those considerations into consideration. I need a bigger vocabulary. And of course, the end game scoring is tense because then the chip scoring comes in. Somebody who is far behind, if they collected a lot of chips over the course of the game, they're going to get a huge number of points by the end. And so it really makes for an exciting finish. Really the only downside for me, besides its abstrusiveness, there's a word for you, except for that, which you overcome. If there's a downside to the game, really it's only that it's a little bit repetitive, because, you know, every turn is the same thing, usually somebody proposing to build a wonder. They could also pass and draw a card, and that's actually a super easy rule to forget. Don't forget, especially in a 3-player game, remember that you can pass, because you might not have enough cards to build anything, right? The other players may not have many cards either. So if you propose something to build and it fails, you've lost your turn. You've wasted your turn. So you have to remember that passing is an option. Passing might not be that big a deal in like a 5-player game when everybody's drawing cards between turns. So by the time your turn comes around again, you will have drawn a lot of extra cards. But in a 3-player game, definitely you'll want to remember passing as an option. But I guess I could see that people would find it a little repetitive because every turn kind of feels the same way. But I mean, you're involved in every turn. Somebody puts up a chip up for, I keep wanting to say up for auction. It looks like it's like the way you play it is as if you're putting it up for auction, but there's no auction. But but the act of taking the chip and putting it on a little pedestal and proposing this feels like an auction. Anyway, anytime a stage of a wonder is built, the calculus of the state of the board changes slightly, right? So that wonder is going to become a little bit more likely to be completed earlier, which if you don't have any involvement in that, maybe you want that wonder to finish early while it's still worth very few points. You know, if you're involved in a wonder, you got a good lead in a wonder, you don't want that built up too fast, so you're always kind of calculating like, well, when my turn comes around, I don't want to wait too much longer to build it. Okay, let's build it now, kind of thing. Of course, it's very dependent on the other players, but it is a very interactive game, and that's what you want. You want the players to be involved. Everybody is working on the wonders together, and how players are able to eke out points here and there based on what other players do. That's the fundamental part of the game. That's what makes the game great. In the game box, there is sort of 2 little mini expansions. So one is there's 4 chips which are 2-tone. So at the beginning of the game, you replace, say, a black 5 with one that has two tones, two colors, one a 2 and one a 3. When you build it or propose it for building, you need, 2 of one color and 3 of another color, so players can offer both cards. It makes that wonder a little bit easier to build, that stage of the wonder, because players are more likely to have cards and can contribute. But overall, I haven't found it to make a huge difference. Use them or not doesn't really matter. What does make a big difference is those blue cards. I forget what the rules call them. Maybe special power cards or something. They're benefits that you get if you complete a wonder. According to the rules, whenever a player builds the last stage of a wonder, so on their turn, they've proposed the last chip of a wonder, it's built, add temples, score points, whatever, but now the wonder is complete and it's going to score points. The player whose turn it is at that time gets a blue card, an action card. It gives you a random benefit you can use later in the game. I didn't teach that. Why not? So in general, I don't much like action cards, like random power cards. Like, oh, I do this thing, I get a random power card, and we'll see what it is, and I keep it secret, and that's something that you guys can't see, only I see that, and then suddenly later on I play it, and there's no way you could have predicted it. I don't see the need for a player who manages to build the last stage of a wonder why they would need a benefit. They're already choosing that chip, they're doing the calculation as to that's the best chip to build. Adding those extra cards just feels completely unnecessary. I've read from people who have playtested the game before it was published by Hans im Glück, and they said in the prototype didn't have those cards. So those cards were added later, possibly by the publisher. Now, Hans im Glück, very good publisher. I usually quite often trust their development decisions. I wonder why they made that decision, if they did make that decision, why they made that decision to add those cards. Did they feel like the game was missing a little bit of fun and surprise? Because the game is simple enough that families could play, but it might be a little bit, like I said, a little bit repetitive, a little bit dry. They possibly felt the need to kind of punch it up, right? Punch up the excitement by throwing in these wacky cards or whatever, but I don't know. But an interesting side fact is that Reiner Knizia has had many games published by Hans im Glück. 2005, which is the year this came out, was the last year Reiner Knizia had any board game published by Hans im Glück. So I wonder, and it's all speculation, it's all wondering on my part, but I do wonder if there was a bit of a falling out as a result. That Hans im Glück, as the publisher, generally has the right to, they're fronting the money to build the thing, so if they want to make changes to it, that's completely their right. And that's the case for a lot of publishers. Who knows? I can just go by what people have said. People have said that this game, in the prototype phase, did not have those cards, but when it came out, it had them. And a lot of people have played them and go like, yeah, the game doesn't really need these. These are not good. Just leave them in the box. But, if you get bored of the game, throw them in for variety, see how it is. I've never felt the need to add them to the game. But then again, do you know the game Battle Line? Also known as Schotten Totten. That's another game of Reiner Knizia, as a card game. In the Battle Line version, and actually later versions of Schotten Totten, it comes with special power cards. And I have never, ever played with the special power cards. I treat it like a little mini expansion, but the base game is so engaging, I've never felt the need to add special powers to it. It's just perfect, just the way it is. And Tower of Babel is like that for me as well. There's another oddity about the game, in that the game comes with a turn order track, which is strange because turn order is clockwise. You can remember clockwise, right? You don't need a turn order track. The idea is every time somebody takes a turn, you shift all the pieces over, and now you know whose turn it is. It's the player to your left. That's whose turn it is. I don't know if they thought that because between turns everybody's drawing cards, that it might be easy for players to like forget whose turn it is. Maybe. I've never had that problem. I just have to wonder if maybe at some earlier part of the design process that there was a changing turn order, that it wasn't necessarily clockwise. I don't know. It's clockwise in the rules, so you have this turn order track, which is completely useless. Just maybe 5 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago, there was sort of a new version of Tower of Babel released from Victory Point Games. And that game is called Planet Rush. And it's a smaller game, but it's essentially the same game. I think Board Game Geek has it listed as a re-implementation. So it's basically taking the core concept of this game and making a slightly different game based on the core concept. Of course, giving it a sci-fi theme because it's a 2010s. It's what you got to do in the 2010s is put fantasy and sci-fi wherever you are. I have never played Planet Rush. One thing that really surprised me when I was reading about it is when you make an offer to build a wonder, or whatever the equivalent, the planet, I guess, in Planet Rush, when you make an offer and it's rejected, apparently you don't get points for that. But that's the coolest part of this game. Look, if Planet Rush came out and somebody had it and they wanted to play it, they put it on the table, yeah, I'd play it. I love Tower of Babel. But I feel really reluctant to recommend you look for that game if it drops one of the most interesting parts of this game. Victory Point Games has posted on Board Game Geek to say that Planet Rush is sort of I think they use the word like a designer's cut, like a director's cut of Tower of Babel, because it's closer to the original prototype than Hans im Glück ended up publishing here. Sure, okay, maybe. Then I have to wonder, like, oh, is the cool part of Tower of Babel where you get points even for rejected offers? I mean, that's from Knizia, isn't it? Because that's the coolest part of this game. And I've always contributed that to Knizia, but Victory Point Games is saying that actually Knizia originally designed it without that? That makes me want to give credit to Hans im Glück even more. They're already my favorite publisher, right? I don't think the game is particularly easy to find. And it's definitely not current because that company, Victory Point Games, was bought or absorbed into another company. And I know not all the games that were in their portfolio carried forward. And I don't think Planet Rush would have been one of the ones that did. So I think it's going to be really hard to find Planet Rush anyway. And I'm reluctant to investigate, even though I love Tower of Babel. It doesn't have that part. It's like the coolest part. So, no thanks. I'll stick with this. And this one is actually easy to find used. There's lots of people looking to trade their copies away. It honestly didn't set the world on fire when it came out. And I can understand why. It does take a few plays to really wrap your brain around it. But it's definitely worth it. It's a game that is a standard in my collection. My family and I love it. We play it all the time. We just adore Tower of Babel. And I really can't say much negative about it. It's just a bit abstruse. It's a bit hard to kind of penetrate and see how you need to do things to win. It's very clever. It's a very original design. And there's no other game quite like it that I've played, certainly. So I'm very, very happy to have Tower of Babel in my collection. It's one of my favorites, actually. But man, this game is divisive. You know, I went and looked at some of the ratings on this game, and there are lots of people who give it, 7 and 8 out of 10. There's a lot of people who give it like a 5 or a 6, and a surprisingly large number of people who give it like a 2 out of 10. I think this game is terrible. It's a divisive game. But I've said this before, you want a game that's divisive. You want a game that gives you strong feelings. You don't want just another game to go, well, I mean, it's fine, I guess, whatever. There's too many games out there like that. You want a game that's going to do something different, and you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. You try it and you know which. Although, again, play it a couple times before you dismiss it. On the love-hate divide, I love it. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like Tower of Babel don't stop being good just because newer games come out. Take care.